Welcome to True Crime Podcast, the podcast where we uncover the shocking, the mysterious, and the forgotten cases that have been shaped history. I'm Max.
And I'm Aiden.
And today, we're diving deep into the incredible case of Ruby McCollum, a woman whose story was exposed the darkest corners of race, power, and justice in the Jim Crow South.
It was 1952 in Live Oak, Florida, a small town where racial tensions ran deep. Ruby McCollum, a wealthy black woman, walked into the office of Dr. Clifford Leroy Adams Jr., a respected white physician, and left after she shot him 4 times. What led her to commit such a crime? Was this a cold-blooded murder, or was Ruby McCollum a victim of a system that gave her no way out? Today, we unravel the truth behind this gripping case and its impact on American history. Stay with us.
Let's start with the background. Ruby McCollum was a well-educated, affluent black woman married to a successful businessman who had ties to the illegal numbers racket. But despite their wealth, Ruby and her family still lived under the oppressive laws of segregation.
Dr. Clifford Adams was a prominent white doctor in town, known for treating both black and white patients. But behind closed doors of his office, a dark reality was unfolding. Ruby later claimed that Adams had been sexually assaulting her for years, and that she had borne his child under the threat of violence. She stated that she was forced into a non-consensual relationship, something that was a grim reality for many black women under the power of white men in the South.
On August 3rd, 1952, Ruby walked into Dr. Adams' office. Dr. Adams attempted to force Ruby to continue their non-consensual relationship, but Ruby refused. Dr. Adams got physical, hitting her multiple times. When Ruby still refused, Dr. Adams drew his hidden revolver. Dr. Adams pressed the revolver against Ruby's stomach, forcing Ruby to comply. Ruby began fighting with Dr. Adams and wrestled with the gun out of his hands. Now armed with the revolver, Ruby fatally shot him 4 times in the back. The details of what happened next should shock the world.
She was arrested immediately, but when she tried to tell her story, she was silenced. In court, she was deemed mentally unstable, and the judge repeatedly blocked her 38 times from testifying about the alleged abuse. The case became a media sensation, with reporters revealing the deep racial and gender inequalities that Ruby faced.
Despite overwhelming evidence of her abuse, Ruby was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. However, after appeals and growing public outcry, her sentence was overturned. She was later declared insane and committed to a state hospital for a decade before being released in the 1970s.
This case wasn't just about murder. It was about power, control, and the silencing of black women in the South. Ruby McCollum's story sparked conversations about consent, racial injustice, and the abuses of power that were all too common in the Jim Crow era.
Ruby McCollum's case remains one of the most significant yet overlooked true crime stories in American history. It exposed the horrors faced by black women, even those who had money and influence. Her story serves as a stark reminder of how justice was often denied to those who needed it the most.
So, Max, what do you think about the case of Ruby McCollum?
I think it's kind of crazy how back then, during like segregation and stuff, like this stuff was low-key common, and like it's crazy how people like knew what was happening and knew like stuff was going wrong, like especially like in the courtroom she was being denied of like speaking her side of the story and speaking what was actually true, which like that's just crazy to think about. I can't imagine being in her situation and knowing like there's no hope for me, you know?
It must be so frustrating not being able to speak. You know, I'm having a very similar moment that Ruby McCollum had in that court case right now. With this guy passing by.
All right, let's get serious now after that interruption. So what do you think about this whole situation?
The whole case is just, it's unfair. They obviously violated her human rights, and they denied her any chance of just freedom. Yep, just because of the color of her skin. It was so wrong. I'm trying to think of a big word. What do you think about this case of Ruby McCollum? Let us know your thoughts by following us on social media and leaving a comment. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps us keep these important stories alive. Thank you for joining me today on True Crime Podcast. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.